Hello, my name is Jesus Castillo, and today I want to show you how to work with multi-threading in Ruby. Okay, let me start by explaining to you how threads work, or what's a thread. Well, a thread is an unit of executions. So that's like a little worker that executes code for you. Okay, all processes, by process I mean just anything that runs on your computer, from Chrome, Firefox, Atom, your PDF reader, everything is a process, and every process starts with one thread. At this one thread, we call it the main thread. Okay, so if you don't tell your program to start any threads, it will start one, which is the main thread. Okay, and you can spawn multiple threads. So if you want multiple workers to do multiple tasks at the same time, or the same task but in a smaller proportion, just make progress on the same task, then you can have many threads. Okay, so let's talk about something very important, and that's called concurrency versus parallelization. So here you need to understand that threads can benefit you in two ways. Okay, so for example, we have concurrency and then we have parallelization, and now I'm going to explain to you the difference. Okay, so concurrency means that only one task can be active at any time. Okay, so only one task can be using the CPU. Tasks that are not active, so you can have multiple tasks running, but only one can be active. But the tasks that are not active can be waiting on external resources like disk or network access. So for example, you want to read many files at the same time. If you only have one thread, you have to read one file after, and when you finish this file, read the next one, then the next one, the next one, and the next one. But if you use threads, you can read, for example, 5 files at the same time. Okay? And the same happens with network access, and network access can be like a web request. So let's say you are downloading images from a page that has many images. Then, instead of downloading one image at a time, because if you only have one thread, you have to wait until it's finished. Okay? So you can only do one task. But if you have 5 threads, for example, you can be downloading 5 images at the same time. Okay? So what this means is that your program can be doing work most of the time instead of waiting for things to happen or to finish. Okay? And in MRI, which is the main Ruby implementation, and what I mean by that is that this is the normal Ruby that you use, the normal Ruby interpreter. Okay, so unless you have installed something else explicitly, so you know that you did it, then you have MRI. Okay, so with MRI, the thing is that you only get concurrency, and the reason is because of something called the global interpreter lock. And I'm not going to cover that in this presentation, but that's the reason, because that you only get concurrency. Okay, and then we have parallelization. And parallelization is another form of multitasking, multithreading. And what happens here is that many tasks can be active at the same time. So the difference here is that with concurrency you only have one task active, but you can have other tasks waiting. But with parallelization, you can, in top of that, in addition to that, you can also have many tasks doing work at the same time. And what this means is that if you can break a CPU intensive task into a smaller task, you can complete that task faster. Okay? So if you use something like Rubinius or gRuby, which are alternative Ruby implementation, they offer parallelization. But the normal Ruby implementation does not. So this is important to, this is why it is important to know the difference. Okay? So quick review. With concurrency, you only have one task. You can only have one active task. Okay? But with parallelization, you can have many active tasks. Okay? So that's the main difference. So now we have enough theory. Let me show you an example. Okay, let me show you how you can use a thread. So to create a thread, all you have to do is to say thread.new and then create a block and put something inside. And the code you put inside is going to be the work you are giving for this thread. Okay? So you can have, when you do this will continue, and the thread will work on its own, and your code will continue working. So if I do puts 1, 2, 3, this line will print even if this hasn't finished. Okay? So imagine there is a very complex calculation in there. This will still be doing work, and your code will continue working, your other code. And that's if you have parallelization. If you only have concurrency, then this will only make progress if it's an input-output operation. And what that means is that you are waiting for a resource like a disk, reading a file, or downloading something from a website. Okay? So all of those are input-output operations, and all of those work with concurrency. But if you have something that requires the CPU, something like a mathematical calculation or some kind of algorithm, that will require to have parallelization to be able to use the benefits from a thread. Okay, so a few things you need to know about threads in Ruby is that you can save the thread in inside a variable, and you can do things like print it, and what you see is the status. So if you look on the right, you can see that it's in the run status. Okay, so it's running. But if we print it a bit later, we can see that it's still running. Yeah. And one thing you need to keep in mind is that if your program finishes, so if I only have this and the thread has not finished, then the whole program we terminate, we finish. So that means that it will not wait for the thread to finish its work. So what you have to do in that case is to call join on the thread. And what this does is tell the thread to wait. Okay? So sometimes you might have multiple threads and we can put them in an array. This is just an example. It doesn't have to be like that exactly. So let's say we have two threads. We can put it in a threads array and then we can call join on all the threads. And we do that with map when we can do this. Okay? So what I'm doing here is having multiple threads. Every thread is doing its own work, and I'm joining, which means I'm waiting for them to finish. If you don't do this, then this might not, as you can see on the left, it's not printing. We are saying push 1 and push 2 inside the threads, right? But when I run the program, you don't see the 1 and the 2 on the right, which is the output, okay? But if I uncomment this and I join the threads, I'm waiting from the threads. And this time you can see the output, okay? And another thing you will notice if I run this multiple times is that the order changes. So you see 2, 1, now you see 1, 2. Okay, and the reason is that there is no guarantee on the order that this will happen. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind. And one more thing you need to know about threads is that when an exception is raised, something, if the program has not finished, so for example, let me add a sleep and 10, you can see the error, the exception is not showing up, okay? And the reason, well, it shows up at the end when the program ends. But in that case, it's not easy to know where the problem is or when it happened, okay? Especially if your program runs for more than a few seconds. So what you can do about that? Well, there is this variable you can set and it's called abort on exception. function type exception equals true. So this is false by default, but if we set it to true, and okay, I guess that's why this is because when I am using sleep, and while sleeping it won't raise exceptions. Ah no, you have to do it before. Okay, that's the thing. So let's see what's happening here. So I'm setting abort exception to true, and I have sleep 10. Okay, but the exception is raised immediately. This exception. But if I set this to false, the sleep is sleeping, but the exception is not shown, as you can see on the right. It's just on the sleep, and when the program ends, then the exception is shown. Okay? So if you are having problems with a program that uses threads, you might want to enable this so you can see if you have an exception inside a thread. Okay? So that's another thing. Okay? And finally, I want to mention that there are many gems that you can use to make threading and multi-threading and all of these things a lot easier. And one of these gems is celluloid, and there is also a few others. Another is parallel Ruby. I'm not sure if that's parallel Ruby, something like that. If you Google for Ruby thread gems or Ruby concurrency gems, I'm sure you will find more. But celluloid is okay. And one thing you might want to use is called the thread poll. Okay, so this is one thing you can do with celluloid. And what the thread poll does is give you a pool of threads that keep doing work. So instead of having to manage the threads and create them like this, I can just say create a pool of 10 threads, and then give them the work to do. And the threads, just like workers, we keep uh, getting the work and completing the work. Okay, so that's one really useful thing. Okay, so that's all I have for today. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments or email me. Okay, so I hope you found this useful, and if you like this, I want you to subscribe to my newsletter if you haven't already. And if you do that, I will send you a free guide with tips and advice to improve your Ruby skills. Okay? And also some bonus stuff in things to learn and improve your skills. So do that now. Click on the button or link below and just enter your email address and click join now. Okay? Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next video.